Hi everyone, my name is Precious Joy and I am the founder of Purity is Precious. For the last 5 weeks, I've been giving these different video topics where I discuss certain things that has been dear to my heart, and I actually have shown myself in a completely different vulnerable position so that you all can get healed and grow and develop from my vulnerability and transparency. So if you haven't had a chance to actually catch up on all the videos that I released over the last 5 weeks, now would be a good time to try to do so, as they are loaded on my YouTube channel, as well as they are on my Purity is Precious website. And so just want to give you a quick rundown on the videos that I released for the last 5 weeks. The first one was called It's Not Me, It's Them. The second one is My Hands Are Filthy. The third one was entitled Lust Over Purpose. The fourth one was called But Masturbation Is My Safe Place. And now this is the fifth video for 2017. It is entitled, Is My Purity for Me or for Others? And this one actually has a blog that I've written about a good 4 or 5 months ago, because I was walking through a position in my life where I had to actually face some hard questions, and that I didn't really understand some of my choices that I had made in the past or whatnot, and how they actually affected my life today. And one of the questions that I was actually propositioned with from God was, is your purity for me or is it for others? And when I said for me, I said it just now in the term as if God was asking if it was for him, but God was actually positioning that question to me, is my purity for me or is it for others? And so honestly, when God asked me that particular question, I remember having to actually do some dissecting in my life with actually trying to understand, who is my purity really for? And one of the things that I came to realize is that my purity had been lived out for everyone else. It had been lived out for my mom. It's been lived out for my father. It's been lived out for, of course, God, and even for the church, because, you know, I'm a Christian. And so in my religion, we do teach that sex is reserved for marriage, and that it's always been a high honor, even in the Bible, on virgins and things of that nature. So it was one of those things that I wanted to make sure that I pleased everyone with. However, I was neglecting whether or not my purity was being lived out for me or just entirely for others. And so because I neglected whether or not my purity was being lived out for me or just for others, I found myself in a position where I became extremely frustrated with where I am currently in my life. I became extremely frustrated with the fact that even though I am considered a virgin, that things was not lining up in my perspective as to what I thought virgins should have at this particular moment in their life. I'm 30 years old. I'm still not married. And yet I was thinking like, dang, I did this thing right. How is it that this has not happened at this particular time in my life? And so I became very frustrated because I was seeing certain things being presented to others. I was seeing God, promoting and advancing others. And in my perspective, they did not even in the least bit attempt to try to do this thing right like how I was. And so that was the type of perspective that I was actually feeding myself. That's not something that I can say is actually etched in stone, because I don't know someone else's story. I don't know everyone's stories. I don't know everyone's struggles. And so that was a whole figment of my imagination that I created in my mind, that I was the only one that was trying to actually do this thing right and walk this thing out in its entirety. And yet I just could not seem to understand how things was not lining up in a better position or in a better perspective and a better scope of things for me. And so I became extremely frustrated. I started to compare my life to others. I started to compare my purity walk to others or whatnot. However, what I did was I neglected the fact that purity is not just something. I actually neglected the understanding that purity is not just sexual, but it's actually a whole overall being of a person. And so that was where, I kind of got the lines twisted and crossed in my particular life. Purity is not just from a sexual standpoint. It's actually something that's, emotional, spiritually, mentally, and sexuality, of course, is part of that. However, I was placing most of the emphasis on the fact that I felt like I knew how to keep my legs closed or whatever. And so that should be good enough. That should put me on a higher pedestal than all the rest of them. And that should be what, God uses to promote and advance me, or even send me a spouse or whatnot. And so when I got frustrated with the fact that it looked like things was not lining up for that, in that particular area for my life or whatever, I became frustrated with the fact that other people were being promoted, other people were getting spouses, other people were looking like things were lining up better for them in their life. However, they mastered something that I did not. And that was a purity from the inside out. That was a emotional purity. That was a spiritual purity. That was a mental purity. They were actually people who can actually move forward from situations, who can forgive easily, and who can actually push past stuff or whatever. Whereas with me, on the other hand, I wasn't that person. Once I was upset about something, it was completely a wrap. I've had a hard time forgiving others, and I had a hard time of moving past situations or whatever, because I think I stated probably in a video a while back that if we could not come to a terms, to a grips on something or whatever, it wasn't okay, or I was not okay with it being that it's okay for neither one of us to be right. Somebody in my perspective had to be right, and I felt like it was me. And so it was hard for me to move past that or whatnot. And so therefore, because that was the type of demeanor, because that was the type of my attitude that I had, it was hard for God to get certain things to me. It was hard for God to actually help me to see things from a completely different perspective. And it was definitely hard for me to actually move past certain places or whatever that actually stagnated me for a long time. And so when God asked me the question, is your purity for you or is it for others? It made me think even on a broader scale, on a broader perspective, to where I had to come to an understanding that my purity has to be for me first before it can be for others. My purity has to be for me before it could be for my mom, before it could be for my father, before it can be for even my church. My purity had to be for me first. And so when I came to that realization, it was as if like God was finally able to unravel to me how I was not pure in other areas in my life, such as in my emotions, such as in my spiritual walk, such as in my mental state or whatnot. I allowed my emotions to have too much ground and too much authority in my life. And so I had to learn how to take that authority back and actually program it to be in a more positive perspective instead of a negative. And so because of that or whatever, it was at that particular moment that I had to learn, like, hey, you might have the sexual purity type of thing down pat or down to a pretty much a good science at this particular moment, but there are other areas in your life that's lacking. And so once I was able to finally understand that, I was able to say, okay, we want to line things up right in this area, this area, this area, this area, so that I can be well-rounded and a well-balanced individual. And I believe a lot of us could be unbalanced in our purity walk or whatnot. I do believe that a lot of us may have it down pat on whether or not, we're being abstinence or, celibate or whatever it is. However, what are you looking like spiritually? What are you looking like emotionally? What are you looking like mentally? What thought patterns are you entertaining? How do you carry yourself when you're around others? What is your emotions portraying to you and even to others when they're in your presence? And so I think that that's one of the most things that's very important, is that you have to understand how you are portraying and carrying yourself in all aspects or whatnot. And so my perspective was so lopsided with my purity or whatnot. And so instead of me becoming so frustrated over some things in the past or what I was seeing was happening with others, my focus should have been just strictly on Precious. Like, Precious, there are things you need to get lined up in your personal life or whatnot. And you have no business looking at what he, she, or they is over there doing. It's all about you. And so once I came to that place or whatnot, I was finally able to make a decision like, hey, my purity has to be for me before I can present it to others. My purity has to be for me before I can expect anything from others, before I can expect anything from God, before I can expect a promotion in any other area of my life. And so when I came to that understanding, to that realization, I began to take away all kind of excuses that I had in my own personal life, all kind of excuses as to why I was in this place, why I got to this place. I actually started to take away the excuses and actually give more answers to myself, so that I can actually bring myself to a place where I can understand how we got here, why we here, and why we haven't moved from this place. And so when I was in a predicament where I was trying to understand my purity or whatnot, and I was living this thing out for other people, I realized that I was truly neglecting myself. I realized that I was truly hurting me more so than anyone else or whatnot. And so it came down to a place where it was like, Precious, you're not going to be successful in your purity walk if you don't have a full understanding and even a full revelation as to why you're doing this in the first place. Because the reality is that when you're fickle in your mindset in regards to your purity and why you're even doing it, the enemy will come and try to actually talk you about it, walking it. And that was something that I struggled with a lot. The enemy would come and shoot these particular thoughts in my mind. And one of them was simply like, the enemy would come and say, you know that the man that you marry is not going to be a virgin, right? And so I would be like, 9 times out of 10, he won't be, and I would entertain that conversation. And the enemy would be like, well, why would you even do it? Why would you even wait? Why would you even attempt this or whatnot? And I would be like, well, I really don't know. I just want to please my mom. I want to please God. I want God's favor. And I just really want to, make everyone else happy. And so because I was weak in my perspective, because I was weak in my understanding as to what my purity was for and who it actually represented, I actually allowed for the enemy to come and plant these little ungodly seeds into my mind that made me question and second guess on whether or not I wanted to remain a virgin until marriage. And so because that I was allowing that thing to happen, it actually stirred up ungodly emotions. I did feel like at one point in time that it won't be an even exchange with whoever my spouse is or whatnot, because the reality is that he may not be one. And so at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Like, I'm cool now with it. It's not the end of the world. Life goes on. There are bigger things to life. However, at that particular time in my life, because I was so small-minded, my mindset, my frame of mind was so limited, I almost allowed for the enemy to come and talk me out of something that would be so valuable and so precious to someone that God has called me into covenant with. And so I had to start to tear down those mindsets, tear down those thought patterns, and come out of agreement with it. I had to start checking the enemy right in the door. When he would come and say certain things to me, I had to say, you know what, devil, we're not doing this today. Regardless of who it is and whether or not he has kept himself from me or not, God will send me his best. God is not going to give me damaged goods. And neither nor will I be damaged goods to him, because guess what? I have an opportunity now to make my purity overall well balanced in every area of my life, and that's what I choose to do. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you all about, with is your purity for you or for others, is that in order to be very successful in this walk, you're going to have to understand whether or not your purity is for you or for others. It's going to be very difficult to actually walk out purity if your goal is to please everyone else but yourself, because you're going to open up the door for different mindsets, different frame of minds, things that people say. Because truth be told, a lot of people know my sexual status, or whatever, even at work or whatnot. And people say little stuff. People try to undermine the fact that I may have desires here and there. But at the end of the day, that don't mean anything to me, because people are going to say what they want to say. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, hey, to each his own. I don't throw darts at people about their sexualities, whether or not they are very flamboyant with their sexuality or not. And neither nor do it bother me when people try to throw darts at me and act like, oh, you might as well go ahead and get it up or whatever it is that they're saying. I really could care less, because my purity is not for them. My purity has become for me. And because that's the decision that I made, because that's where I am today or whatnot. And the reality is that if I was to slip up today or tomorrow, I really do feel like it would be completely stupid on my end. I'm very hard on myself or whatever about certain things. I'm very, tough about things or whatever. And so when I'm focused on something, I really do discipline myself extremely hard, especially mentally or whatnot, when I make falls and slip ups and things of that nature. And so for me, it's not about what everyone else is doing anymore, what everyone else is saying, whether or not other people approve of me or approve of my purity walk. It's about my decision. It's about my commitment. It's about me proving to myself that I can do this. And it's also about me helping other women that's around the world like you all to see that this thing is doable. I never imagined that I would have a website called Purity is Precious. This was not something that I dreamed of. This is not something that I wanted to do. But however, when God told me to do it, and when God told me to launch the website, I knew that this thing was bigger than what even had met the eye for me at that particular time in my life. So perhaps I'm walking this walk so that others can see that it is definitely doable. Perhaps I'm walking this walk so you all can actually be encouraged and walk on this walk in your journey and see that you are not alone. Perhaps I'm walking this walk because God wants something different implanted in the earth, because who wants to be like the status quo? Who wants to be like the norm? I mean, there's so many people that look alike, that does the same things, that act alike or whatever. So why not have someone who is actually standing for something that is actually meaning, that's actually great, and actually choosing to be different than what is presented every single day? And so I happen to fall into that category, and I'm okay with that. I'm becoming okay with that every single day. I'm understanding purity from a whole nother perspective, and I'm actually bringing myself to a place where I choose to walk this thing out the right way. And yes, like I stated before, it does get hard. I think a lot of people is very naive to, purity as a whole or whatever. I think that especially when it's someone who is a virgin or whatever, they think that we don't have desires. They think that because it's something that we never had experienced or whatever, our feelings is irrelevant concerning it or whatnot. However, I tend to ignore people that make those type of statements and those type of conversations. I don't entertain them like that, because they are completely naive. A lot of people have no type of idea as to the type of level of strength that it takes to walk this thing out, when you have friends, when you have coworkers, when you have even other people in the church that's not taking this as serious as what you do. I mean, it can get very discouraging. It can get very, to a place where you feel like, why am I doing this if no one else is serious about this? However, my purity has become for me. And that's why your purity has to become for you. Because once it becomes for you, it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. It doesn't matter what everyone else is saying. And it doesn't matter how everyone else views you. Your purity has to be specifically for you. And so that's where I'm going to wrap this one up at. I didn't want to go too long in this video. So this one is actually entitled, Is My Purity for Me or Is It for Others? And I encourage you to try to think more onto that concept, because it'll make it a lot more easier for those of you that is choosing to journey in purity with me, or that's choosing to journey in celibacy with yourself or with whoever. It'll definitely help you all in the long run. And so my name is Precious Joy. I am the founder of Purity is Precious. You can actually look at every video that I mentioned in the very beginning of this video on my Facebook page, which is Purity is Precious. You can also catch the videos at purityisprecious.com, or follow me on Instagram at Precious Joy. I love you all. I wish you all a happy new year. I have some more exciting things coming up in 2018 that I will be sharing briefly. And so I wish you all the best, and I will see you all next year.